Welcome to the Good Fight podcast. I'm Kim Bigler. I'm a little bit rocky in my voice today because I am recovering from a cold and laryngitis, so bear with me. But I have started this season 2 of the Good Fight podcast because in season 1, I felt led to speak about my son, Phoenix Bigler, who went down from a cardiac arrest, just riding his bike at 17 years old around the block. And he obtained, after not breathing for up to an hour, not having a pulse for up to an hour, he obtained a global anoxic brain injury. And I really felt from the Lord that in the valley, and while all hell was breaking loose around us, that I wanted to capture that testimony of how God not only saved his life miraculously, but saved our faith as a family. And so if you have not watched season 1, I encourage you to listen to season 1. But today, I always pray about who to have on these podcast moments, because I thought season 1 was going to be the end all and be all of what I was going to do as far as in front of the camera. But the Lord really said, there's more testimonies I want you to grab, and there's more testimonies that I want you to share, because there's more people that need to be inspired and healed and set free of grief and shame and everything else. And I would like we wanted to partner together to do that. So we found the right people at The Reminding is a coffee shop in Covington, Louisiana, and they have a studio called Studio 7 within that coffee shop, and it is only through them that is making these testimonies available to the wider public. So we want to thank them. And if you haven't gone to The Reminding and you live nearby, they have excellent coffee and teas. But in praying about who I wanted to have on today, there was a story circulating that I didn't quite understand most of the facts to, and thinking about grief and thinking about loss and where is God in the darkest times of our lives. I thought about Sherrie and Norman Manton because they had lost a child, which they will talk about, but in 9 days later, they lost another child, which was their only 2 children. So as young adults, these children obtained these, had tragic accidents that caused them, caused the Mantons some grief because they lost both of their children in 9 days' time. So I could not imagine what I had gone through with Phoenix. I could not imagine not only losing him, but losing my daughter, his sister, 9 days later. How does one overcome that? How is it possible to keep living in the land of the living after 2, your only children, have died 9 days apart? So welcome, Sherrie and Norman. And I just thank you so much for being willing and available to be with us today, because I know that your testimony is going to touch so many people, so much so, because I like to divulge everything. After I had a pre-interview with the Mantons, I fell sick and crazy, lost my voice, and you experienced some warfare. We call that spiritual warfare around here, folks. And if you don't know about spiritual warfare, when you start following Jesus, and more importantly, you start speaking to glorify Jesus, you're going to get hit, okay? That's what we call hit jobs, all right? But it's in the spirit. And Norman knows a little bit about hit jobs because he was a former cop, and you'll know about that later. But before we get to this, the 2 tragedies back to back that you all had endured and had to overcome, I would like to first get to know how you grew up. Did you grow up with faith Was it faith in Jesus? What kind of faith did you go before leading up to these tragedies? What kind of life were you living, and faith did you have growing up, or was it being built at all, or maybe not at all? Let's hear from Sherrie first.
Okay. I grew up going to church every Sunday with my family. I always believed that if I was good, that I would make it to heaven and that good things would happen to me. And I really didn't think really bad things would happen because, I had followed that. I didn't study the Bible at all. But I had a deep faith in God, but I did not, now I understand I did not have a relationship with him, and I didn't understand what salvation was.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Norman, what about you?
I grew up, Lutheran. I never finished my catechism. Pastor Shear was my pastor, but my father wasn't really a religious man. My mother tried. And it just I grew up basically without knowing who God was. Simplest answer.
And where did that kind of lead you in your life? Because where were you all setting up the stage to how God not only upheld you in this tragedy, but transformed you through the tragedy? What developed in your life up to that? What kind of person were you? What kind of father were you? Husband?
I wasn't a good father, and I wasn't a good husband.
Tell me a little bit about that.
As you know, I was a former policeman, and I did some things that caused me to resign. And, I kind of worshiped money more than anything, and I didn't really care how I got it. I couldn't tell you the truth. I'd rather run for a mile than tell you an honest answer. And, I would connive and it was just trying to get money and make everybody, impress everyone. And I basically bought my friends. And there are a lot of good policemen out there. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those. And, it is what it is. And growing up, I'm also a builder. I built homes, and I don't build anymore. And I just was not a Christian person. I didn't really know about God. I mean, I hear people say, you need to pray. I'm like, yeah, right. And, most policemen are alpha males, and they kind of tend to take charge. But, it wasn't until later, much, much later in life, that I realized that, there is God. And then we lost David and Megan. I felt like a punishment. It was, for all the bad and horrible things I did, from, the stealing and the lying and the adulterous part of my life. I was being punished. God took my children because I was such a horrible person. And by the grace of God, somehow Jesus decided that wasn't for me. And when I told my wife was terminally ill, I started coming to First Baptist Church, but I wouldn't go into church. I just would go in the parking lot and I'd pray a little bit. And, my youngest brother, Nolan, who's only 9 days older than my son, 3 or 4 years ago, he'd call me every Sunday morning. It was aggravating. Hey, you want to go to church? And another really good friend of mine, Tim Garlick, would just try to help me. And he knew I was out there and not a good person. He actually sued me. That's how I met him, in federal bankruptcy court 30 years ago. And
so when you say you were a bad cop, you were.
Oh, I sold drugs.
The typical bad cop that everybody talks about. You were that person.
I'm the poster child for it.
You were the poster child. I think we must say those things.
Yeah, that's true.
Because people don't understand that Jesus can change someone so fundamentally at the core of who they are. They don't, my son was a miracle. People could easily see that Jesus did a miracle. He was not breathing. He was dead. He was blue from all first responders' accounts. And then he came back to life miraculously. But what people don't understand is actually the bigger miracle is when God changes a human heart. And that's what I'm hearing has happened to you, Norman, because in our pre-interview, you were telling me, for someone who says they lied habitually, you were telling me the truths about who you were in spades, to where I literally left going, Lord, man, that if people do not believe in the miracle working power of Christ to change a human heart, after this interview, I don't know what it's gonna take.
But all I can hope is that just one person comes to God, because my only regret in life is that I didn't find God sooner. And I kind of think from being in a law enforcement standpoint, I was kind of negotiating with God. Okay, I'll do this if you'll do that.
Right.
Well, God's a much better negotiator than any of us.
Right.
And I didn't have a willingness, the alpha male personality. I'm going to take care of this and I'm going to fix that. It only lasts so long, and then you hit that brick wall.
Right.
And when you hit that brick wall, you basically have two choices. You can eat your gun or you can overdose, which I tried both. Thankfully, I was unsuccessful at both. I really want people to know that when you think you're beyond redemption, call me up.
Yeah.
Come on, I'll tell you like it is.
Right.
I was not a good person, and I'm not perfect now by any means. Look, I got to pray constantly every morning.
Who is?
During the day, and
and if you claim perfection, I don't know if I want to be your friend.
Well, I'm far,
and I would kind of doubt that you're
it.
with Jesus. That's right.
I kind of ask God every morning to give me the heart of a lamb and take the heart of the wolf out. I don't want to be the sheepdog anymore.
That's
Sometimes
a wonderful prayer.
I find myself trying that, and I'll just take a step back. And just to look on some people's faces that have known me all my life, when I tell them I'll pray for you instead of punching them in the mouth, which, it's priceless. It's God. It's not me. If you tell me, Kim Bigler, that I can change you, you can't. God can and will. All through recovery, I was a chronic alcoholic. And one of my best friends, Jerry Coyne, in 2008 came to my house, and 2015 came to my house and said, look, you going to a Celebrate Recovery meeting. He's working a detail, and I'm drunk. So I'm like, all right, dude, I'm going, but I'm drunk. I don't care. Come on. And I went to a Celebrate Recovery meeting in November of 2015 on a Tuesday. Second time I'd been in First Baptist Church. The first time was when I got out of jail in 2008. Joe Gerald brought me and put me on a front row. And I'm like, dude, I just got out of jail for murder that I didn't commit. And he's like, we don't care about that. Come on, I'm going to tell you about God. And Joe and I are still friends today, but it was different in the aspect that I was going to church to, even in 2008, I just wanted people to accept me.
Right.
And today, I don't care if you accept me or reject me. I'm just going to tell you my story.
Because we've been accepted by the one that really matters now.
That's the only person that's accepted inside me.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not a person. God knows. Whalen said
He knows the heart.
He knows what chair you're sitting in and how many hairs are on your head.
Right.
And to me, that's powerful. And I don't do things for recognition anymore. I don't feel like I have to buy any. One of the biggest pivotal moments in my life is, I wanted my wife to go to church, and she's like, yeah, right. Well,
before you get to that story, because I want to get first, because I feel like there's a before and after, I want to get to the instance, what happened to your children that God used to transform you. Now, a lot of people will listen to this, and when they hear the bad stuff that's happened to people, they think, like you did, they think, I deserved it. This is Jesus getting back at me for not being a good mom, for not being a good dad. I had those moments with Phoenix too. I'm like, this happened to him because I've done some things wrong. I haven't made all the right decisions. I didn't obey you that one time, or things like that, because we want to slap that on ourselves. And I have learned since that that Jesus uses suffering, but he doesn't necessarily send suffering. Mm-hmm. And life is life. It rains on the good and the bad. And it rains on everyone because life has sin in it, period. And in this broken world, there will be no lack of grief, because the Bible does say that in this life you will have troubles. It says you will. It doesn't say you may. It says you will have trials, you will have tribulations, but behold, I have overcome the world. And so that is when I was like, what did I do to deserve this type of moment? That was the scripture that Lord kept giving me. I told you would have troubles. You're in the valley for sure. But I have overcome. And because I have overcome, and because you look to me, you have overcome. So tell me, Sherrie, that, well, first of all, was Manton as bad as, it's always one thing coming from the person, but you ask his wife and you'll get the real stuff. But I think we've already gotten the real stuff from Norman. But do you have anything to add to what Norman is saying about how he grew up? I think you pretty much kind of mothered your own kids without him.
Yes.
He was an absentee dad.
Yes.
Maybe a little hard on the kids, being kind of that cop, alpha male, especially, hard on himself and behaving the way he has. I can only imagine what kind of impartation that was, what kind of imparting that was doing on the kids. But from your perspective, how was Norman?
Well, when we first met, I was building a house, and he was, I hired his dad. Didn't know him before that. And so we got together, and when we got married, he wasn't like that. He worked hard. We didn't have a lot, but what we had, we worked on and fixed up. And I got pregnant for David, had David in October, and things were going really well. And before we had Megan is when he ventured out, building a house, and met up with some people. And he didn't grow up with a lot. So I think that made him...
So there was a hook of money.
Yeah, hook of money.
That hooked him.
I grew up in a family, and I had everything I ever needed, and money was never my thing. So when it began...
So it was like a spirit of greed was allowed into his life.
And I could feel that David and I were not at the forefront of his mind.
Right.
It was, building and getting
And
money.
David is your son.
David is our son.
Firstborn.
Firstborn.
And Megan was your second.
And Megan was second. So when I got pregnant for Megan, we had already moved a couple of times. And I had Megan, and he went off to work. I was having a C-section, and I was going at 12:30. One of his friends came and sat.
And you could see him change?
Oh, instantly. And when I would say something to him about, not being around, he would give me excuses. And
probably get defensive.
Yes. And I had a very strong mother, and so I was used to being told what to do and what to think. And so I would think it was me.
Wow.
He turned it around where I thought.
So you have this domineering personality, and then you have this demure or whatever you call it personality, more submissive, because you've learned to be that with your mom, who had maybe some control issues. So it was just like I can see how.
And it got where it got old, just to keep trying. So we got pregnant for Megan, and I almost lost her. I had to go to bed for
stress.
He didn't really say why, but they put me to bed and for a couple of months. And then I went back to work, and we had Megan, and life, just kept going on. And he was out, with the business, and I was home with the kids. And so that's how they kind of grew up. Now, he was there at some point.
Sure.
He came home and stuff, but and he would talk to him, but nothing, like play with them.
Right.
And things. We did go on a couple of vacations. But as they got older, you could tell David wanted his dad around, but he was only around when he wanted to be. And so I knew it was affecting the kids, and I knew it was affecting me.
Right.
I just I wasn't strong. I wasn't a strong person. I
Right.
didn't know where to go or what to do.
Right.
And so
Did you know you were doing this to your family? Because
No
I
clue.
know I know the way when we talked, the way you grew up, it was like, you didn't have an example.
No, I didn't. And I had no clue of the damage I was doing to my wife or my children.
I think a lot of people need to hear that.
Well, I had no clue. I mean, to me, that from the upbringing I had, my dad worked. My dad was an alcoholic. He quit drinking when he was 60-something years old. But you have to realize I left home when I was 15.
Right.
I built my first house when I was 15 and with hammer and nails. And my dad gave me a job, but he didn't really, I never remember a time in my life when my dad talked to me about God, ever. And I thought that, once I started making money that I could buy, I was even trying to buy my wife and kids. And I did. I spoiled, my children. We talk a lot about, before they passed away. And, I would shower them with gifts instead of giving them the gift of time. So if you're a parent, spend time with your children. Don't try to buy them. Don't throw money at them because that don't work.
And discipline them.
Yeah, and it doesn't. And as brutally honest as I can be with you, I didn't know then. After they died for 5 years, I was a drunk. That was just self-pity and guilt. It wasn't really, still at that point, it didn't really have a lot to do with God. I mean,
Right.
when Sherrie sent me off to rehab, I called her because they wouldn't let you use the phone. If I don't know, day 3 or 4, who knows? But I said, "Hey, get me out of here. You're divorced." She said goodbye and hung up. And I don't know.
Because y'all did divorce.
We did when I had gone back to college when I was 38. And I became a teacher. I graduated at 41. And it was November, and I was going to be graduating in December on the 15th. And I just kind of looked around and thought, this is not good for my kids. This is not good for me. And so, and he wouldn't stop. And so
He wasn't changing.
No, we divorced, and
he didn't want to change. Wasn't
No.
that he wasn't changing?
I don't think,
Didn't want to.
I don't know if it was that he really didn't realize what he was doing, or he did not want
Right.
to accept it. So we were divorced for 3 years. I had moved to Covington and raising the kids, and he started come back around with the kids, and the kids said, Mom, we want a family. They love their dad. So we remarried, and things, of course, I told him. When he went to rehab, I said, Norman, I can't take the drinking and stuff anymore, the friends and all that. And I said, so we've lost the kids. We don't have anything. Let's divorce. And I said, or the alternative.
So you divorced after the kids' tragedy or before?
No, that was long before.
Oh, okay, okay.
They were like in junior high when we
okay.
divorced.
So you had gotten remarried, and so it had been a while.
And it just continued. I mean, nothing changed. It just went right on back.
You all just went on.
But I was so busy with teaching and and my thing was I always wanted children. And so when I got my children, that was my gift from God.
Right.
And so I raised them in the church I was raised in. And when they were, I guess in middle school, we started going to a little Baptist church in Folsom, and they loved it, and they accepted Christ. And they prayed. David would pray every night.
So they knew the Lord.
So they knew the Lord. And now
That's
that I look
important
back
to
on
mention.
things like cards that they wrote or letters they wrote to me, God is always mentioned in that. So we just went along, and then the tragedy.
Coasted.
We just coasted.
Now
and then
tell me about the morning or the day of when David passed.
Okay, it was a Friday. I had a week left in school. I came home, and he came home with another guy he was working with, which is Norman's cousin. And we were outside talking and laughing and joking, and he was going out that night with some friends. And so I ironed his clothes, and he got ready. And we have a little next door neighbor he was friends with, Jordan, and they were out riding around on the property. And he came back, and he was mad. And I said, David, what's wrong? He said, well, now we're not going. The guy said, we're not going now, and I'm really mad about it. So he went outside, and he kind of, he just had that madness.
And how old was he?
He was 21.
Okay.
And he had a gun that was his, and he had given it to a friend, and he left it in a boat, and it had rusted. and he gave it back to David, and David had cleaned it all up, got it all back working. And he came in and he said, Mom, he's coming in the morning early. I'm going to give you the gun and the bill, and I'm not getting up that early. So I said, okay. Well, he went out and he shot the gun to make sure that everything was okay. And he went and put it in his friend's truck. They were in the driveway at our house. And it was around 10 at night. And he reached in to get it. And so I'm on the front porch, and the door is, in front of him. And then I saw him go down, reach out, and he came up. And when he did, I heard it, but I saw fire come out of the end of the gun. And I said, David, that's not funny. Don't do that to Mama. Because I thought he had just shot the gun. And in an instant, I saw him go down. And I just ran and I put him in my arms, and the neighbors were calling 911. Now, Norman wasn't home yet. Megan and her boyfriend were not home. And so I just sat there, and I remember we're out in Franklinton, so there's no lot of lights. It was like a blanket of stars was over the sky. And I'm sitting down and I'm looking up and I'm screaming at God, please, God, don't take my baby. He's my rock. He's my best friend. He's my firstborn. I can't live without him. And I could feel his little heart getting weaker and weaker. So I looked down at him and I said, David, I was there when you took your first breath. And now I'm with you when you took your last. And then it was like the world just lit up. Everybody was coming in. The ambulance, the police cars. Norman came in. Megan came in. And everybody was screaming, and they were screaming at me. What happened? But God gives you a grace of numbness for a little while. He kind of puts that on top of you. So, but I remember after it happened and we went inside because I didn't want to see it.
You know what? That is true. God does
just give you.
I try to tell that to people. They're like, how in the world can you see your son and still believe he was alive even 10 days later when they said he wasn't going to make it? God does put, call it numbness, call it disassociation, call it just being in the presence of God. Whatever you want, there is something that you have to, there is something to keep you from losing.
Because your brain literally doesn't know what's going on. I mean, it was like, am I in a dream?
Yes.
Did I dream this?
Yes.
And then it was like, after that, it was like I couldn't even understand what people were saying. People were coming and going. And it was like I couldn't understand. It was like I was in a bubble by myself.
And I can't imagine you having your son in your arms.
But a couple of people made a comment to me after, that just sounds horrible. And I said, no, it was a gift from God. I said, did I want my son to die without me there?
Right.
And the gun, when he lifted the gun, there was a bullet jammed, and it hit him right in the back of his neck. And I was like, I can't even believe what I'm going through. But like I say, he gives you whatever you want. I called it numbness.
Yeah.
But that is a gift from him. But you don't know that at the time.
That's true.
You don't understand it at that time. Because, of course, my mind immediately went to, oh, my God, I wasn't good, and I wasn't a good mother.
So you, like Norman,
and it was like,
said,
God,
I deserve this somehow.
I've done everything I thought I should do, but you've taken my son. And I remember my daughter, just holding her, because they were best friends. Mm. And so I couldn't imagine what she was going through.
And she saw him?
No, she wasn't there. She came back. She got to Folsom. They were going to Covington, she and her boyfriend, to get something to eat. And when they got to the red light in Folsom, she said, something's wrong. We have to go back home. I don't know what it is, Jeff, but we got to go. And so they came home. And, she was just, there's no book. And, of course, you never expect it to happen to you.
Such a broadside.
And they had lost some friends. And and other people, I don't want you to know the pain that we felt. But you need to understand that I feel like we're so ignorant about grief. We don't want to know about it, but we really should.
Yeah.
Because it's all they had friends. I was worried, about them. Well, we went along. We buried him on the next Tuesday. He died on Friday night. We buried him on Tuesday.
Now Norman, what before that? How did you find out, and what was your response?
My wife called me and said David's gone, and I was on my way home, and she hated, so she didn't want that at her property. And I was on, the phone was going over the radio in my truck, and I could hear her screaming, I don't live in St. Tammany Parish, I want Washington Parish. At that point, I didn't care who got there. I just wanted the cop and me kicked in. I just said, get a helicopter, whatever we got to do. It was denial. When I got there, I saw my son, and he was on the ground. He looked like a little baby. He didn't even look like him. And I immediately checked, and he was gone. And
So you did see him?
oh yeah, I did see him. I laid on the ground with him. I held him, and I don't remember much of what I did. I do remember a Washington Parish Sheriff deputy asking me if I wanted an investigator, and I said no. My wife saw it, and he said, "Are you sure you don't want this investigated?" No, I don't. I don't need one. My wife said, she saw it, and I don't know what happened to me, but I remember sitting on my gazebo and a policeman walked around the corner and he said, "Are you okay?" And I looked him dead in the face. I said, "Would you be?" And it probably wasn't the nicest thing to say, but you know what?
Grief is grief.
I didn't care. And I called, I think the first person I called was A.J. Han. He and I were best friends. And I said, "My son's gone." He said, "I'm on my way." And
Now, her instance, which is interesting to me, right when that happened, in the thick of it, you did say God. You for someone that said you didn't know about salvation or you didn't have a relationship, you looked straight to him in your darkest moment. Did you?
no,
Was he even in your mind?
no,
Interesting.
no. It was,
Very interesting.
it didn't resonate really at all. I wanted my son back.
Were you mad or were you sad? What was your dominating
I was
emotion?
numb, but I didn't know why I was numb. I went through a plethora of emotions. I was angry, and I don't even know how to put into words all the emotions I experienced. But I do remember after we buried David, my daughter Megan was sitting in my lap, and she said, "Don't worry, Daddy, we're going to get through this." And I don't really know what I felt. I know that basically the next memory after my son dying is my wife waking me up. Her cousin was a state trooper, came to tell her, and I didn't wake up, that our daughter had been in an accident. And I remember walking to the door and seeing Bully standing there, and he said, "Megan is gone." And I didn't think about God. I didn't really think. I just went into a rage, into a fit that you can't imagine. And then,
So I just want the audience or the listeners to know 8 or 9 days?
9 days.
9 days after, I want you to catch it, 9 days after their son passed from a tragic accident, which I think they tried to rule a suicide.
They did on the death certificate. It said suicide, and people were talking about it. And then then the guilt really started. I'm the cause.
But you believed it was an accident because you saw it.
Yeah, and at first it was like I don't think my mind could really determine. And the next day, a friend that worked with David took me outside, and he said, "Look, you have to listen to me for a minute." He said, "You're beating yourself up." He said, "Look at me. Do you really think David would have done that in front of you? He adored you. I was his angel mom." He said, "Would he have done it with a .22 pistol? He's got his SIG that he takes everywhere he goes." He said, "David did not commit suicide." He said, "But you're listening to other people." And he said, "But you have to understand, it was an accident."
Right.
I had a big problem with it being on a death certificate.
Yeah, it really bothered us for a while.
So suicide is on his death.
Yes, it's on his death certificate.
And we couldn't get it changed.
Any self-inflicted gunshot wound in the state
Oh,
of
right.
Louisiana is automatically classified. I went as far as going and find Frank Minyard, the coroner, because we didn't want him in St. Tammany Parish. The Orleans Parish coroner came and picked him up because I just, I don't know, call it ignorance or whatever you want. I just didn't want anything to do with St. Tammany. And when I saw David died on May 14th of 2010 at 10:19 p.m. and Megan died on May 23rd at 1:23 in the morning.
So that's what I wanted to clarify to listeners, is that 9 days after your son David passed, your daughter had an accident. Tell me about that.
She was at University Drive, in Hammond, Louisiana, at a nightclub called Afari. She had a pink armband on. My daughter didn't drink. She left. She had a bunch of friends there, a bunch of my son's friends. They got together and they wanted to get her out the house. I didn't want her to go. Well, she asked me if she could use my truck. I told her no. I said, use your mom's car. She she was calling Sherrie during the night, Mom, I'm okay. Her friends were telling her I'm okay. She went to a gas station on right off the University Drive and bought gas with a credit card. I think she went like 1,900 feet after that. She left that gas station and hit a pole, and she died. Well, we buried her, and nobody could explain why she hit the pole. People said your daughter followed your son.
Committed suicide.
Again.
So it was really, I don't even know how to process that today. 15, 14 years later, I still can't process it. But about 2 years after she died, I opened a letter, and it was a Jeep Grand Cherokee that Megan was in. And if you turned the left turn signal on, it caused some kind of problems. Well, I was drunk for 5 years after I lost my kids. And one of my friends said there was a 9 o'clock Norman and a 5 o'clock Norman. I don't know. I don't really remember a lot, but I know I wasn't a good person because I had no fear of anything. I didn't care about anything. We just existed. And I don't really know. I know that when they told me that Sherrie was sick, because all I could think of was I'm going to lose Sherrie. And my friend says it's bad enough to go to church. I said,
okay,
yeah.
So that's another thing. So you found out, even though they thought this was suicide from your daughter, you didn't know if it was you found something in her Jeep Cherokee where a warrant, something was recalled because of a left signal, and that's what she was making. And so
yes.
You believe that it wasn't a suicidal act, it was a malfunction of a Cherokee at the time that was noted and she was making a left turn.
That's correct.
Exactly.
And
so
she and
I wanted
had
to clarify
talked
that.
after David died. One day, the next morning, she came in my bedroom and she sat on the bed with me and she said,
This
Mom,
is Megan.
This is Megan. She said, Mom, what are we going to do without David? That was her. David talked to her every day. He protected her. And I remember looking at her and I said, Megan, I don't know what we're going to do, but I'll promise you I'll get up every day and get dressed. After that, I don't know. And we buried him 7 days apart. She was buried the next Tuesday, and they're buried side by side.
So you had 2 funerals in a week.
And
of your only children.
Of my only children. And Megan and I both gave eulogies at David's, and I gave Megan's eulogy. But I remember when she died, I remember thinking to Megan, why'd you make me promise that? But I remember thinking, oh, okay, God, boy, am I bad? You took both of my children. That means we'll never have grandchildren. What is going on? Please, if you're up there, please tell me. But I remember that was in May. We went along, and in July, I walked into Lyon Elementary, and my principal, Janine Barnes, was sitting in her desk, and she said, what are you doing here? I said, oh, I'm not supposed to come back. Nobody's told me what to do. But I went back teaching, and the only time I took off was at the end of that year. I took from Easter, and I went back and I taught.
Wow.
And
then after that, you got sick?
Then after that, I got sick. I started with some severe stomach issues, and I went from doctor to doctor to doctor, and nobody knew what was wrong with me. The pain was so intense when I was teaching. I thought, I'm going to pass out. I went from 185 pounds. The lowest I went was 110. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. but I taught. And then I finally had to take a leave. And once I retired from teaching and I was home, the pain has eased, but it's never gone away.
And what did you think, going back to your thought that I cut you off on earlier?
Well,
You thought, now God is going to take my wife.
yeah, I absolutely believe that, Kim, in my heart. I said, God, I know I've been a horrible person. You've already taken my
So now
children.
you're having thoughts of God.
Yeah, I am. Oh, I had a whole lot of thoughts of God.
Oh, I bet.
When I went to rehab, that's pretty much when an old country guy, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's a contractor here in this parish. He saw me at an AA meeting after 3 months of rehab, and he said, "Where you go to church?" I said, "I don't." He said, "You ain't going to make it without God."
That's a word from the Lord right there.
I looked at him, I said, "Dude, really?" And I'm still doing some work for the guy right now. But if I would have just, in 2015, if I would have taken that to heart, it wouldn't have taken me to 2020 to find church and we always talk about it's in God's time, not our time.
Yes, it is.
Well, the only reason I was going to the church is negotiating with God again, saying, "Look, don't take Sherrie and I'll be better." And
We're always trying to earn.
I know.
We're always trying to earn grace
And bargain.
and bargain with God when He's more sovereign than we give Him credit for.
all he wants is for you, at least in my case, I can't speak for you or Sherrie, but, I remember getting on my hands and knees and putting my forehead on the ground because someone told me that. I said, "God, I'm spent. I'm done."
Is this 2020?
Yeah, this is 2020. I said, if you just just do with me what
So
you want.
years have gone by.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And are you getting closer to God?
No.
So y'all are just grieving.
Oh, yeah.
And you kind of
And
get...
by the grace of God, without y'all knowing it, He's sustaining you because y'all would have done yourselves in through the stomach.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that was a spirit of grief attacking your stomach and your life. Wanted to drag you, snuff the life out of you. And then the spirit of suicide wanted to snuff the life out of you. And then in 2020, which is crazy to me, Norman comes more to the Lord than Sherrie. Tell me that story. He's the one that actually brought Sherrie along.
Well, I was raised and I had faith, but because I never read the Bible, I never understood the relationship. I never had a relationship with Jesus. And so I just didn't know. And I hate to say ignorance, but I didn't know. But Nolan's little family would go to church, come to our house, and we would barbecue and stuff. And one day his son came up to me after vacation Bible school and he said, "I'm going to be baptized." He said, "I've accepted Christ." Well, I realized how proud I was of him. And Norman would get up and go to church. And it wasn't that I didn't want to go or I thought something. I knew who Pastor Bailey was. But on this morning, November the 4th, Norman came in. He asked me 7 times, "Please go, please go." I said, "Okay, let's go." So we drive up, and I didn't have any thought about what it was, what was there. I just was going. And we walked into the little vestibule, and then when the gentleman opened the door and I walked into the church and I looked around, something happened to me because it was like my insides were not electrocuted, but there was something. And so we just went on. And when Pastor Whalen, the music I love, when he started talking, I remember looking at, I said, "Norman,
That's exactly what you did.
I said, he's talking to me. How does he know? How does he? And I got the little card that you sign in, a new part, and I'm writing everything. And Norman looked over at me and he said, "Well, I think God's got you." And we went to Discovery and talked to the pastors, and they recommended I go into Marlene Peachy's Connect group because she was raised like I was. And that's where it started. And a month later, we were baptized.
In the Lord.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, when he came, and I would say to Pastor Whalen, "Why did it take so long?" And he said, "Sherrie, if you'd have come 10 years ago, you wouldn't have been in this place. It's in God's time, not in yours."
It is.
And I'm telling you, when I tell you that it was like a light bulb went off, a door opened, and I went into another place, and it was like, it only took me about 2 weeks of listening to them read out of the Bible and stuff, and I went, I went to Pastor Whalen and I said, I understand now. And he said, what? And I said, it's not about me. It had nothing to do with me.
Yeah,
I didn't do anything wrong. But for 12 years, I
punished yourself.
myself. And I said, it had nothing to do with me. It wasn't about me. It was about my children.
Yeah.
They were good kids. I mean, every kid has their thing. But my kids would help. David would get up and bring you the shirt off his back. Megan would come get money from me, and I didn't know what she was spending it on. And her friends told me after she died, they said, Miss Sherrie, I know you wonder. She was buying diapers, formula. One time she called me to ask me who fixes our tires. She had a young girl was trying to get to work. She was going to get fired if she didn't go, and she had a baby. And her parents had kicked her out. Megan fixed the tire. We paid to fix the tire. But I didn't know all of that.
So getting to know him and getting to know how much he loved you, it set you free.
It certainly did.
From that you had anything to do with or God inflicting something on you.
And I truly
as
believe
punishment for. Did that happen to you, Norman, in 2020 when you said you knelt down and you kneeled?
It didn't happen to me until sometime in 2021. I think it was around sometime in June the 6th is Megan's birthday. Holidays are always hard for parents that have lost children.
Sure.
And I remember, praying and asking God, just please get Sherrie. And I asked her 7 times to go to church, and she threw those blankets off of that bed, and she said, fine, I'll go. Well, for, 8 or 9 months before that, I was going to church. And I was going to church not for the right reasons.
Sure.
I was going.
It was like your penance.
Right, yeah.
So quote unquote.
And when I realized that, I talked to a pastor and I said, look, I'm going to be baptized, but that water is going to boil. And I actually told him that. And Cliff looked at me. He said, no, son. He said, because
no,
I
it's
called
going to
my
cleanse
mother.
you.
I called my mother because going to church for just a few months, I learned that, the man's supposed to be the spiritual leader of the house.
Right.
I struggled with that big time because, here I am, a piece of garbage, for lack of a better term, less desirable human being. I didn't do that with my children. I didn't bring them to God. I didn't bring them to church. If I did go to church with them, it was for appearances only. And that's not, that's no way to be.
Right.
But the really turning point for me was sometime around June, and I was struggling. It was around Megan's birthday. I said, God, just do with me what you want. Just take control of my life and let the Holy Spirit guide me in everything I do. I still say that today, constantly. And, people tell me all the time, you on fire for Jesus? Well, you know what? If you're lukewarm, he'll spit you out. Mm-hmm. So there is no in between. And in every action or everything I do, I try to put God first. And, people don't know the greatest gift. Somebody asked me, man, you Norman Manton, what you doing at that Baptist church? What they giving away over there? What you getting out of that? I said, salvation.
Right.
And the look on their face is like, it's kind of funny, because you don't expect
a new heart.
Right, yeah, some rough guy.
I don't think he ever thought he would ever find that. I think we had kind of settled in. And
to church.
A lot of parents that lose children divorce. Well, we didn't. And it worked for us because if he was down, I knew.
Yes.
And if I was down, so it really worked. But I don't think we ever sat down and said, okay, there's got to be something. We just kind of thought, this is it. We're going to live like this until we're gone. Mm. And I'm telling you, when my eyes opened, it was like, oh, why didn't I know this before they died?
Right.
How much it would have been a totally different outcome. But and it took a long time, but now I realize, because I didn't learn when I was growing up that God has a plan for you.
Yes.
And I believe that bad things didn't happen to good people.
Oh, yes.
But when I learned about his plan and that everything that happens in your life, bad, good, whatever, that's his plan, because that's the person he wants you to be.
For the good.
And it's like, okay, but I still tell him sometimes, I'm just alone. I love where they are. They're in heaven. They were good kids. We're going to see them again. but the loneliness like this time of the
Sure.
year. It's just my brothers both have lots of grandchildren and all my friends do, and we don't.
Right.
And so sometimes I kind of lose my train of thought and I think, oh, why? Can you tell me? And now I know. I used to say, I want to know why. When I get to heaven, I'm going to ask him. He's going to tell me. Now I don't need to know. Now I know that it wasn't about me. It was about them.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different life. I mean, I am a totally different person than I was then.
I think that
So Norman's not only the miracle here, you're a miracle.
And see, I knew him when because people have called me and said, look, tell him to quit playing around and telling people all the time. I said, let me tell you something. Nobody knows him like I do.
Like you do.
And I said, and when he was doing all that stuff all those years, I kept thinking, should I divorce and run away? But I was raised in a family that you stayed married.
Right.
And I wasn't happy with it, but I put all my interest into the kids.
Right.
But when he changed, and I knew it immediately.
Wow.
And people can believe what they want.
Right.
But it's not a game.
Right.
It's not, this is the real Norman now.
Right.
And,
So
I told him, I said,
this is who he was meant
I said,
to be.
you were chasing that devil was after you because you were chasing that almighty dollar.
Yeah.
And now, look.
And I struggle with that because, I don't care who you are. Life is life. And
Life is
bad
life.
things are going to happen.
Yes.
But, beyond losing our two children, that's certainly the worst thing that's ever happened to me. To either of us or to a lot of people. And, to come back, God was there the whole time.
The whole time.
Yes,
I
he
was
was.
just ignorant to the fact, and my ego or alcoholism, or that's another thing too. In between the time we lost the children to the time that Jesus called us and we were saved, there isn't a antidepressant or a pharmaceutical cure that we didn't try. And as I sit here today, I'm on absolutely nothing.
Wow.
And they had 5 or 6 different medications. I remember when I went to rehab, this goes back to being a cop, they said, bring all your dope with you. Wow, man, well, I'm stuffing a bag full of it. I got there and they put it in a drawer and they incinerated it. It was 3 days later, I'm like, I'm still mad. Man, I had some good stuff in there,
Yeah, you told me on the phone about it.
But, it just, for Sherrie can tell you more about when the light bulb. I know when I first started going to church, I was serious about it, but I just, and this is going to sound crazy, but it's the absolute truth. I woke up one day and I said, you know what, I'm just done. I'm gonna live the rest of my life, for God, and I still have fun. I'm that.
Sure.
I'm the pastor's job security, so I'm their project. I call Waylon the principal for a reason. I don't like going to his. Look, don't get me wrong. I love the man with death. We'll do anything for him, but he's just so knowledgeable. Now, Bill and Josh, on the other hand, Bill gives me guardrails to stay in, and Josh just
It takes a village, my
Josh
friend.
baptized me.
It does.
He does. It takes a village. Just me. And I don't know why God has chosen. I know why, because he's a merciful, giving God. When you're little and you fall and you skin your knee and they say, oh, you were bad. God doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Not in my life, he doesn't.
Yeah.
So every day I wake up and I say, God, let me be a blessing to someone.
Right.
And
you are. I don't think that's what I'm getting at to, that now that you all are new people, because the Bible says we are a new creation in Christ Jesus.
And we are.
And people don't understand that transformation is only powerful. Only realized in Jesus.
It's like the
in
weights
that
fell off.
Yes, in that relationship, and we're unbecoming who we thought we were, and becoming who we were always meant to be. And this was not imposed on you. Mm-mm. This was used for you.
Yes.
That's biblical, is that everything that is bad, everything that is almost just tragic, and you can't see any good coming out of any darkness, he will transform it into light, into a powerful testimony, into power, into purpose, into our good. And not only did he use the darkest time in your life to transform who you are, to give you a new mind, to give you a new heart, to save your marriage, like really, he is going to use you, and this is the start of it, this platform right here. He is going to use you to save many others.
You know, and I say when all this came about and we were baptized, our marriage totally changed. You know, we were talking more, you know, and I was one that didn't know how to forgive. And so, you know, I had that wall up, you know, that he had hurt me but
you're
all
gonna pay.
that, you know, all that went away.
I used to tell people Mother Teresa married the Antichrist.
That was
I still got friends of mine call me a little devil. Well, one friend calls me a little devil, and I'm working to get him to church, and he's friends with my Connect Group study teacher, and he's like, "You talk to him?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "What you say?" So he said, "Ask me to pray for him." So I'm gonna pray for him, you know. But it just that pivotal moment in my life, I can remember. We were both, my mother, Sherrie, and I, were baptized on December 4th of 2021.
Beautiful.
And that was, for me anyway, I mean, I'd done all the things I was supposed to do. And, you know, I don't really know that you have to do anything but accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and really mean it. And if you're an addict or an alcoholic and, you know, or you're in recovery, you know, go find God.
Yeah.
Because you say in a meeting, in a preamble, there's one that truly can, that one's God. Go find him, because I don't know if I found God or he found me, but I thank God every day
you.
for pulling me out of that pit of hell.
He rescues. And that's what I want to tell everyone today is that now you all do so many good things for so many people. And for someone who is greedy, wanting recognition, you don't hear about it at all.
No.
And I had to find out about it from, how did that foster care, you know, that youth and foster care get that stove in their new, Norman, you know, and we have to find out behind the scenes the stuff that you all make happen for so many people, because you're not trying to get the glory. Mm-hmm. It's just God working through that new heart, that new mind. And instead of gimme, what can I get? You have a true giver's mentality that has nothing to do with penance, that is just done with a cheerful heart, because God has given you so much back. And for people who have lost both and only children 9 days apart, to say that God has been good.
Yes. Yeah.
To say that he's been faithful.
He has. And that, you know, when you think about it, it's like when I say
huge.
things to people, they're like, how? They tell me at church all the time, the ladies will talk to me and like, how do you do this? How do you say these things? And I said, because I learned the word of God and I crave it. And now I have full understanding. And they are up there waiting for me. And
that's the greatest hope,
yes.
Yeah.
is that whether our kids have been saved like mine still on this earth, or whether we've lost our children
that was a big one too.
or loved ones.
Yeah, why is her child?
That I get that all the time.
All that was in the beginning when I didn't know.
Right.
Now it's, well, her child still, you know, is going to help
God's
people on
plan.
earth. My kids might have helped people by going to heaven.
Exactly. God's plan is God's plan, and that it's all for a bigger plan of salvation for the earth, not just for our church, not just for our community, not just for St. Tammany Parish, not just for the state of Louisiana, not just for the USA, but for the earth. Your testimony, your kids taken, my kids saved, both are contributors to God's story and God's plan for the earth that will save many souls. And those are the things that I wish people would know, is that I always hear people say, well, you don't know what I've gone through. Well, you have your son. I'm like, but God sits on the throne of it all.
That's right.
Of it all. And at the end of the day, you or I have no control over the results. We're called to believe. We're called to contend, but God's final answer is final. Right. And his final answer is fair.
Right.
His final answer is good. His final answer is faithful. And people don't understand that, and he will turn any pit into a purpose that will be part of the salvation of the earth.
Right.
And I do believe that you all are just beginning. I want you to turn it into a book. I want you all to, as many invitations as this platform launches for you to go speak at churches, you all need to do that, because I hear so many miracles in this right here. When the good fight is about fighting the good fight of faith here on earth, I can think of no other who has done that than you all. And I don't see just a miracle and God getting the glory for such tragedy and turning your lives around, but how much he has helped you heal from such grief and such a life of debauchery and greed and sins that people don't feel that they can ever get disentangled from. Mm-hmm. You all speak to all of that. And I do want to wrap up with this, because this is what actually connected us. And that is my son living connected us.
That's right.
And I want to link this kind of to Phoenix. Tell me your connection to Phoenix and up until when you saw him at that Chris Tomlin concert.
So one church in the Connect group, and a person told me that a young man fell over on a bicycle in Covington, had no clue who he was. He said, we need to pray. This was like maybe the week after. Go back to church, or I think it was on a Tuesday morning. They said, Kim Bigler. I said, well, I know who that is. And they said, how you know her? I said, well, some guys around Covington call her the Dragon Lady. And they're like, what? I said, yeah. She's a chaplain for Covington PD. And they said, oh, I didn't know Kim was a chaplain. I said, yeah. They said, how you knew that? I said, well, I had a life before I came to the church, and these people know her. I said, but, we need to pray for him. And I remember there's another father in my Connect group who lost a child and a grandchild.
You do have to tell them, now that you've called me Dragon Lady, you have to tell them why they call me Dragon Lady. Or they think I'm just a big bad person.
No, they saw Kim preach at a church, and she preaches about accountability. And they, some of them are drug dealers and some of them are trying to live a new life. But the exact words he told me, he said, what you doing hanging around that Dragon Lady? I said, why? He said, because she preach in church and she bring that fire. So, we'll take that for whatever you want.
I'll take it.
I know you listen, going to hear this, and no, I'm not saying your name, but don't quit cutting my grass, though, please.
Don't quit cutting my grass.
It just, and then we were praying for Phoenix in the Connect group, and my wife and I would pray in the morning and at night. And it wasn't for about a month I realized, one of my pastors brought it to my attention, because we were praying because we didn't want Kim and Ben to feel the pain and grief we felt every day. And he said, no, you're going about it wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, I rode the short bus on this Bible journey, so tell me how. And he said, look, pray for Phoenix, God's will, and pray for Phoenix's recovery, but that God's will be done and that Phoenix will make a full recovery. Well, we started praying those prayers, and we all kind of adjusted it to that point. And the next time I saw Phoenix was at the concert at church, and that's when I couldn't tell you what Chris Tomlin said the first part of the concert. I really don't care, but meeting Phoenix, seeing him alive, I know a whole lot of policemen. And they're like, dude, that kid was done. Mm-hmm. And she brought him back. And, I'll tell them God brought him back. Yeah. But, it just...
He gives us the faith.
To be where we were, Sherrie and I were, and for lack of a better term, we were in the pits of hell. Mm. And I don't know why God, because she's always been the religious person in our marriage. I don't understand how. I know how now God did it, because if I ask Waylon, he's going to tell me you didn't do it, God did it.
Yeah.
And I just know that I just want to bring as many people to God that I can bring. It's just for him, it's all the glory for him. But praying for Phoenix, witnessing a real miracle. Right. I didn't see myself as a miracle, and I still don't. I mean, I'm God's mercy. By his grace and mercy, I'm here, I'm sober, I'm productive. I got a beautiful wife, and we're going to leave here and go eat some lunch. But I just think that a grieving parent, don't punish yourself.
Right.
Pray about it, because I am happy. I went from not wanting to get out of bed or even brush my teeth,
right,
to
People
every
need to
morning
hear
I
that.
wake up, say, thank you, God, for another day, and who can I help today?
Who can I help today?
Yeah.
And I love that you guys still, like, you all you marveled at the fact that God did do a miracle and that he can do a miracle.
Oh, yeah.
Because you told me that with your son. You're like, to see a miracle.
Well, I always look back and think, when I could do it, I look back and I said, God, first of all, thank you for letting me hold him. That was a gift.
Right.
And thank you that he didn't even know what happened. I could be in a courtroom fighting against somebody that killed him. And after Megan, I said, thank you that I know where she is.
Right.
She could be missing and never know.
promise is we'll
and
see
I
our
remember
children
a mother
again.
saying, how did you get to those things? I said, because after a while, you have to wake up and say, because I've always heard this, out of every bad thing, good comes. I said, in something good. She said, I don't know if I'll ever get there. I said, yes, you will. I said, think back
Only in
to
the
all
Lord's
that your
hands.
children,
Yeah.
think about. And I think I was mad because he took him. He was mine. But now I realize,
He was never yours.
Well, and I'm
It
honored
was
that I
the
was
Lord's.
chosen to
Yes.
be his mother.
That's
and I
the
did my
revelation.
job, and now that's where he is.
I had to do the same thing with Phoenix. It was like, how can you do this to my child? How can this happen to my child? And the Lord would always say, he's not your child.
I know. And
He's
that is really
mine.
hard for mom to accept.
You're a steward of me willing this person here to do something for me before he was fully formed in his mother's womb.
Mm-hmm.
David, Megan, Phoenix, here or there, before they were fully formed, God had a plan and a purpose for their lives. And that does not stop regardless of events.
And people need to understand
have you ever thought that, had Phoenix not had the accident and the knocking all the horrible things, did you ever think that maybe I would have never met you? Maybe part of my salvation is God working through Phoenix. Did you ever consider that? I'm not smart enough to figure that out, but I just thought about it.
I'm only maybe one step more enlightened in the Lord because what I'm saying is I feel like I'm a dumb nut just like anybody else, right? Like, why am I here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you keep saying I'm not smarter than you. I'm going, wait a second, you might be even smarter because look, he brought me. I'm a different person as well, and my high school friends probably still doesn't think my transformation is real. So I understand in a small town, you are what you are.
Yeah.
And it's up to God and them and the Lord to see differently. But I do think about that. I said, Lord, if this didn't happen, would people's faith be renewed, as they say that what happened to Phoenix, his story, renewed their faith, brought them to faith. And I just say, that's when I get a whole glimpse of the world. The Lord's like, that's why I keep reminding folks that it's not your story. It's mine. You can't even choose, Kim, because I didn't want to film. I didn't want to do this podcast. I didn't want to actually talk to anybody about it, especially while I was in it. And he said, it's not yours to determine if you tell it. It's mine. You're telling my story.
And I never knew that growing up. I thought, we all think it's me. And I just never thought about
our lives,
what
our
tragic,
house, our kids, our dog, our bank account, our purpose,
and it's
our
not
plans
ours.
for the day, our grocery list. And the Lord's like, it's all mine.
That's right. And once you accept him,
You got me.
I did. I knew I was giving you a word, my friend.
She gave me straight up. That's exactly it.
It's all mine. It says every good and perfect gift comes from the Lord. And when he gives a gift, he adds no sorrow to it. And you go, how can that be? I have sorrow over my kids. He's like, yes, but look at the fruit it's going to produce, and that will give you joy.
and that's what you have to get. That for me, that's when things really
Turn
change.
over.
I mean,
Yes.
it was just, accepting him and him giving me salvation, and he died. I never even thought about why he died on the cross. And I'm thinking, well, if I could pray myself to heaven, he wouldn't have had to do that. But he had to do it because
he had
we all
to intervene.
sin. But that he loves me so much that all that is forgiven. And all he wants me to do is, love him, trust him,
Be obedient.
to him, and my life is going to go.
And people think being obedient to Jesus is like being in chains and you're a slave to this and a slave to that. No. It's an adventure.
Yeah.
It's an adventure.
Many
no
chapters.
matter what, many chapters. And yes, you'll have ebbs and flows of when life just seems to be life and it hitting you where it hurts. And then there seems to be these uplifting moments, and it's all good when we keep our hands and our feet going before us for the Lord and our voice for the Lord. Like when I think of Phoenix, this not happening to Phoenix, I just don't feel that we would be put on a platform in such a way that God will be getting this much glory from our lives. And everyone asks, why Phoenix? Because it rains on the just and the unjust, the righteous and the unrighteous. People think like you do, we earn good lives. That's not true. If anything, if you're called by God, you are going to be having a target on your forehead, and all hell's going to break loose over your life.
Well, that's what I say.
Over your children, over your finances, over your purpose, over your plan. No, my friend, you've enlisted. You've enlisted in battle. So if anyone says, I have a perfect life because God's with me, I'm like, well, we need to talk. What you doing for him? Because those who are truly advancing his kingdom, which means just his presence here on earth, they go through some stuff. And it was through obedience, through suffering, that the Lord learned obedience himself. It was up to the cross. And his biggest moment was not miracles that he was doing on earth. His biggest moment of disarming the devil was when he died. And everyone thought it was because he lost. Lost what? So he lost his life, and now generations are gaining, and that's how we can see our kids again.
Jesus didn't do anything wrong, but he died on that cross for us. And I tell people, just because we're with the Lord doesn't mean my life is going to be perfect. There could be another tragedy down the road. But I can say today
we know
that I am
who walks with
better
us.
prepared, and I will lean on him and trust him.
Yes.
I didn't have that before.
Yes.
So that was the torment. But now that I have it, it's like I accept anything that I think I've done maybe one of the hardest things, but I said, you've made me stronger. You give me what I need, and I will do what you tell me.
Just to back up that truth, and then we'll wrap it up, is that this is what it'll do for you when you go through stuff like this. Because I feel like I've faced my greatest fear, right? We feel like we've faced our greatest fear, and we've come out, and now I do believe God will empower us to speak to those people who are walking through the same. But it gets you to the point where I did have to, when Phoenix came home, and he would have setbacks. And I was like, Lord, you said you would recover him and more, and seeing him struggle with his, regaining his left arm and not being able to get off the walker because his brain is still reorganizing and making new pathways. I have to say, when I would see a setback, I would have to fight discouragement, fight unbelief, and fight the devil. Did God really say? Right? Those little things. And to the point where I said, what if Phoenix died after all of that? The Lord said, would you still think I'm good? And I said, yes, Lord. So he says, give me your son again. And that's my testimony. I gave him my son, and that happened to my son. Give him to me again. Yes, Lord, if you ended up, for whatever reason, taking his life, it is for good, your story somehow. And when that fog happened yesterday, because when you go through trauma, you kind of look at it differently. And I saw the fog, and my husband goes across the lake for work. And he goes across that time. And I had to say, that same voice happened to me. I wanted to be rattled when I saw on Facebook this fog over the causeway, and then all these car pileups, which I'm so thankful nobody was, fatally injured in that, but which is a miracle in and of itself. But I wanted to, a little something inside me started like triggering, and I was like, oh no, not been now too. It was like a quick little voice, not been now too, and the Lord's like, but if he's in there, you would still be okay because you have me. He didn't say he's not in it. He just said, you'll be okay because you have me. That was the first thing that came to me. So that's interesting that the Lord just keeps it on what we have. And he wasn't saying what you have, what you don't have still.
Right.
Still, if it was all, you still have me.
Right.
That's right.
And that's enough. So I had to go, you're right, Lord, no matter what, you're enough. And I had peace, and I calmly, please tell me you're not in that, what's on the causeway. He goes, no, I decided to stay on the side of the lake, go to the office here in Mandeville. Oh. But see, God already said, but if.
Yeah.
Even still, but if. Like you said, what we went through doesn't mean we will never go through something hard again.
Absolutely not.
But the Lord's like, the way I walked you through this is the way I'll walk you through anything.
Now you have the armor on.
But you have me, and I'm always going to be enough, no matter
What happens.
what giveth and taketh away means in our lives. So this has been very, very. It goes deeper and deeper for me, because you're like, okay, I got my son. Thank you, Jesus, for teaching us and giving us this testimony. But if something else. We don't ever, as believers, have to fear what's around the corner.
No.
And that is a very peaceful thing to feel.
It's peaceful, because that's what he was saying. If you've surrendered your children, and I've challenged you to surrender your husband, you have to be resolute that you will be fine because you have me. Right. And really, you're not Norman's constant. It's Jesus as your constant.
That's right.
Ben, Phoenix, Ren, any of my friends, they're not constants. I live knowing that there's only one constant, and it's Jesus. And he's enough. He is enough. And this is for somebody out there. He is enough for whatever you are experiencing right now. He is your key out. He is your key in. He is your key to everything. And even though he says you will have trials, you will have tribulations, he has overcome, and so shall you. Well, I just thank you for being willing and obedient to coming on the good fight. Because this is, if this don't teach people what the good fight looks like, good fight of faith ain't pretty. You better, look, you better armor up in the armor of the Lord, because it's not pretty. And I love what that guy said to you. I forgot where in the testimony you said it, but you said, this man just says, if you don't have God, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
That is true.
That was the first AA meeting I ever attended when I got home from rehab in 2016. I went in 2015, didn't get home to 2016 because someone was admirably persistent. But, that was real. That's just now that, I'm a child of God. That was God talking to me through him, and I'm too dumb to hear it.
Well, God is speaking through you today, and someone else is saying, I've been too dumb to hear it.
Well, yeah.
And we pray today that they wouldn't be too dumb to hear his voice calling out in the wilderness. Come, today is the day of salvation.
Right.
Norman, would you pray us out?
Absolutely.
For the listeners.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together and for this outlet in this podcast, that maybe just one person that hears this, Lord, would come to accept you, Jesus Christ, as his Lord and Savior. And I hope it's many, but we're here for everyone. And I just want to give thanks to the Lord for Phoenix's ongoing recovery, and just for the miracles that happen around us every day, Lord. And thank you for your grace and your mercy on all of us, God. And I pray this and all things in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you.